Number 5. Stonecutters and the Secret Order. Season 6 is up there as one of the best seasons of The Simpsons overall. Like, it was just banger after banger. Tons of classic episodes. You got the Who Shot Mr. Burns plotline, some of the best in the series. There's a bunch of season 6 episodes on this list, just to show how seminal it was. One of the more memorable ones is Homer the Great, where a downtrodden Homer feels he has no place in the world or higher meaning until he finds himself involved in a gentleman's club called the Stonecutters, a secret centuries-old order Homer finds himself at the center of when he is revealed to be the prophesized chosen one of the group. Now, as it turns out, the Stonecutters are far more than just a place for the guys to play dominoes and kick back. They're also a powerful clandestine lobby group pulling the strings behind the scenes. They're behind everything. They're rigging the Oscars, they bury the electric car, they keep Martians under wrap, and they find consistent work for 80s icon Steve Guttenberg. The Stonecutters are a fairly obvious stand-in for various conspiracy theories like the Freemasons or the Illuminati, and if you believe the conspiracies, and I bet you do because you're watching these videos, allegedly they run the world behind the scenes. It's always rumored and long thought that they're controlling everything from the shadows. Could the Simpsons writers be letting the public know the truth of these sinister dealings? How these organizations work? Could Homer's secret monkey society be pulling the strings? Now, of course, if I was in a secret cabal that had made the world into my puppets, one of the first things I would do is discredit all the theories about my organization by, putting them in episodes of a beloved animated comedy show, making it seem like you'd have to be nuts to believe in that sort of thing. But that's just what I would do if I was part of a secret order controlling things. And if you're looking for more conspiracies, theories about beloved shows from your childhood, we have got plenty of that. Click through Top 5 Scary and I'm sure you'll find something worth streaking at. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but most importantly, keep watching this video right now because we got way more weird Simpsons predictions coming up for you right after this. Number 4. Super realistic holograms. The Simpsons has been going on for so long that their episodes that were once in the past are now set in the future. Iconic Lisa's wedding episode, by the way, another season 6 episode. That episode's future flash forward took place in 2010. Very funny to think about that now when they say Homer was a child, he was a child in the 90s. I'm not ready for him to age up for a few years to be a 2000s kid. Anyway, it's just funny seeing what they thought the future was going to look like and how we keep surpassing those things, and we'll see where it goes from there. Eventually, the Simpsons started doing a little mini story arc of sorts with their future flash forward episodes, and one of them is in the episode Holidays of Future Past from the series' 23rd season. So I could probably say anything happened in this episode. I doubt anybody's still watching then. I'm getting off topic here. Bart is down on his luck, and as one could probably expect, he's still living under the thumb of Principal Skinner, who's now Landlord Skinner at the Springfield Elementary Loft. Classrooms getting converted into apartments is depressing, but not really the scary prediction we're going for here. It's when Bart's watching Itchy and Scratchy. Instead of it being an animated show, it is now a 3D hologram that seems like it physically exists within the environment. It's a tangible thing. It's even splattering all over the walls behind on what used to be the chalkboard Bart was writing on every day. Now, holograms are already getting pretty out there in terms of technological advancements. Our man Homer himself was even a hologram, joining his father Matt Groening up on stage at Comic-Con one year. And I think it's possible that in the eventual dark future, we'll have holograms that exist as real physical objects you can touch, interact with, and I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see hologram TV shows. Hologram The Simpsons would be a lot of fun. Hologram South Park, I don't know if I'd let that into my home. I'm not 100% confident about that. I do suspect though, if there was holograms that you could touch and interact with, we would never see anybody going outside again, ever, if that happens.
Number 3 on this list is the persecution of Christians. Religion, although it can do great good, has also caused horrible evil. Throughout history, we can see that religion is basically the leading cause for humans to start fighting each other. What someone believes and the rules to which they govern their life is really important to us humans, and Christianity is no different. The Bible has talked a bunch about the persecution of Christians before. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. That's just one of the passages in the Bible talking about it, but we also have some other ones that are just straight to the point, reading, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Now, Christians being persecuted is nothing new. This is a prediction that's actually already come to fruition many times over. Like I said before, religion has started many wars in the past, and the persecution of Christians has certainly been a reason for a couple of them. It's possible that this isn't actually done though. I'd like to believe that the world is getting to a place where one can believe what they choose to believe, and that's fine for them, but the fact of the matter is we just simply aren't there yet. There has always been and continues to be the persecution of not just Christians, but tons of groups with all different beliefs. It's sad to say, but this might not be over yet, and this prediction may continue to be proven correct. Number 2 on this list is famine. For probably most of the people watching this video, famine, or the thought of going hungry, most likely isn't that close to you. However, there are still millions of people in the world that suffer greatly from famine and die from it all the time. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famine and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Famine is mentioned a lot in the Bible, and I think it was probably a sign of the times. We have to remember that when the Bible was written, the world was not nearly as advanced as it is today. Food and water, basic resources for survival, were not a given by any means, but something that people had to fight for on the daily. If you had these resources in abundance, then that was considered a luxury and you were probably really wealthy. Even though we don't live in those times anymore, and now for a lot of people, water is at your nearest tap and food at your nearest supermarket, famine is still a real thing. It should also be noted that we should never take food for granted. Some experts are predicting that if global warming continues at the drastic rate that it's going, food will become far harder to grow and get a lot scarcer. Fingers crossed we can prevent this from happening and keep everybody well fed in the future. And finally, number 1 on this list is an asteroid. Listen to this passage from the Bible and tell me this isn't just a tad bit concerning. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So I don't know about you guys, but the prospect of getting hit with 3 separate asteroids really doesn't sound like a great time to me. The way that they describe it may be a bit tame too, to be honest. If we're gonna get hit with 3 separate things from space, then it's very likely that more than a third of the trees are gonna burn up. In fact, it would probably be the end of the world as we know it. I've done a lot of research on the possibility of an asteroid coming and crashing into the Earth, and it's a real concern. Luckily, scientists don't predict anything in the near future, but that doesn't mean that it still won't happen. In fact, statistically speaking, eventually it will happen. Whether we're ready for this impact or are capable of defending ourselves from it, that's another question entirely.
Number 5. War. What is it good for? 7 months the Great War. People dead of evil doing. Ruin ever shall not fall to the king. Now, if you've watched any of our previous videos on Nostradamus and other end-of-the-world prediction-style videos, you know that Nostradamus and the other seers tended to keep their predictions pretty vague, but sometimes they spelled it out simple enough that even a simpleton like me can follow along. Nostradamus is predicting a big war, a great war even, in size, not in quality. I don't think there was ever a great war. If the quatrain is anything to go off of, Nostradamus predicts that the war will erupt across Europe and then ravage the countryside, while hopefully keeping the city of Rouen, France in a good spot, and will refuse to fall to the king. Now that part is open to a little bit of interpretation, because really that could mean anything. Who could the king be referring to? Is it one particular world leader? One nation vying for power? Is it the Burger King mascot who's finally snapped and is on a warpath of world domination? He's easily the most unhinged and dangerous of all fast food mascots, and the one I would most expect to start a war. Now, this is obviously a delicate subject, but the current situations across Eastern Europe is already cause for enough alarm. A war that's got everybody on their toes and watching the news constantly. And I don't think anyone wants to see it develop further into a proverbial Great War. A 7-month Great War sounds like it'd be over in a flash, but I think the last thing anyone wants is a war that's over in a flash, knowing the nuclear-powered arsenals out there. Shorter war is not necessarily a good thing. Nuclear annihilation is kind of the last thing anybody needs out there. Hey, hope I'm not bumming you out too much, talking about global conflicts and possibly the end of the world. Let's talk about something fun, like our fun channel. We got all sorts of scary content of just about any topic you can think of. So click through, stay scared, but stay watching this video, because we got a whole lot more predictions left to go. Number 4, Mars and Elon Musk. Listen to this quatrain. The two contenders will unite together. When most others unite with Mars, the African leader is fearful and trembles. The dual alliance is separated by the fleet. This one seems too perfect, you know? Immediately as I read that quatrain, maybe you made the same connection too. Mars, African leader? Immediately coming to my mind is Elon Musk, the South African billionaire tycoon who currently owns Twitter and has been extremely outspoken about his desire to flee this planet and to become the king and colonize the red planet of Mars. But who are these two contenders that have to unite together? Could it be referring to global superpowers coming together for the future of humanity? Or is it Facebook and Twitter coming together and he's just looking to buy more social medias? Some professional followers of Nostradamus' work, such as Lori Reading, has argued in favor of this as well, arguing that this is referring to the billionaire's plans for galactic domination. Another quatrain seems almost connected with this line from another verse. Take a listen. The light of Mars shall go out. Could this be again a reference to the mission? A suggestion that perhaps this dream of Mars is just that, a foolish dream, and that a colony on Mars would fail in upon itself. It also links up bizarrely well with the Opportunity rover. If you remember that from a few years back, the little guy who was rolling around the surface of Mars, its last transmission was, "My battery is fading and I'm going dark," which is almost like directly saying a light of Mars is going out. This is actually starting to creep me out here. Nostradamus might have been magic just a little bit. Time will tell, obviously, if this one remains to be true, although after Twitter, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I don't know if I want to pay $8 a month to subscribe to Mars Blue for a checkmark.
Number 3 on this list is a solar shutdown. Back in the 1970s, the study of the galaxy and space was at the forefront of everyone's minds. We were learning a lot about our universe and how the laws of physics operate in space. We were also learning a lot about our sun, the most important thing to us in our living solar system. During this time, though, we made an unsettling discovery about it, something that if proven true would end all life as we know it. This is called a solar shutdown. A solar shutdown is when a star, like our sun, doesn't operate at its full power, but its activity level drops. This activity level could drop as much as 40% compared to what it's doing now. The reason that they theorized this is because the sun wasn't emitting as many neutrinos, a particle associated with solar activity. As more research came out, paleontologists have found evidence that this happened roughly 650 million years ago in a period that they refer to as the snowball Earth. They call it snowball Earth because Earth was basically one big ball of ice. If the sun was to lose 40% of its power, then the oceans would all freeze over and all life on Earth would cease to exist. The problem is, there's no way we would ever be able to stop this or do anything about it. We also wouldn't know that it's happening until it's actually transpiring right in front of us, because there's no way to predict it. The sun means literally everything to us, and a dip in its activity by just a little bit would mean our slow demise. We just gotta hope that 2022 isn't the year that it decides to slow down. Number 2 on this list is a massive cyber attack. Ever since the introduction of nuclear weapons, humans have always had those at the forefront of our minds when it comes to massive world-ending scenarios. However, we need to start shifting our thinking a little bit. A cyber attack could be just as deadly, if not more so, than a nuclear war, and it's honestly far more likely in my opinion. Since the beginning of the internet and online activity, the capability of someone being able to remotely hack into someone else's computer and steal information, that's all been possible. It's also possible to remotely hack into someone's computer and control things on said computer. This has happened many times in the past and on some extremely high-profile companies too. For instance, in 1999, Jonathan James hacked into NASA and the US Defense Department.
He was able to install a backdoor into the computers, which then gave him access to tons of classified information like passwords to military computers. The craziest part about all of this was that Jonathan was 15 years old when he did this. It's really not a reassuring thought when a 15-year-old is capable of hacking into NASA and the US Defense Department. If a terror group was to do something like this, then the power they could possess could be endless. They could remotely launch nuclear weapons at will. They could shut down power to everyone on the planet who might be on life support. They could honestly do almost anything they wanted and launch the world into a complete disaster. This is one of the ones on this list that I fear the most of all. We just have to hope that the firewalls of these high-profile companies are stronger than they were in 1999. Number 1 on this list is the equation. This entry is really interesting and something that's widely debated in the scientific community. Richard Gott III was an astrophysicist and is one of the founders of the equation that ultimately predicts when the human race will end. He first got enthralled about the idea of creating a math equation to predict the future when he did that very thing in terms of the Berlin Wall. He predicted that the Berlin Wall would fall within 2.5 and 24 years. He was correct, and it did in fact go down within that time frame. He then took the equation that he did that with and, along with some other physicists, attempted to apply the same equation to the existence of humans. The time frame isn't as long as we may hope though. In fact, this math equation gives even odds that the human race will no longer exist from right now until 760 years from now. So that means that next year is very much in the time frame that we could all die out. Now the way that this equation works, you don't actually know how the human race is going to end, just the time frame that it's going to happen. This is part of the reason why some other scientists have refuted this theory, because they believe that the equation can't possibly be correct if you have an unknown variable causing the actual extinction. As far as we're concerned, we kind of just need to hope that they're right and God was wrong, because even if next year isn't the one where it all comes crashing down, 760 years still isn't that much time left on the clock.
Number 5 on this list is better than human robots. Humans are far from perfect. I think we can all agree on that. But up to this point, there hasn't been a single other species as intelligent or capable as humans have been. That's why we have effectively taken over the whole planet and have become the dominant species. We may not stay dominant for much longer if robots can become better than us though. Best Life says, a more immediate concern that will only be exacerbated in the decades to come is the phasing out of jobs and entire industries as artificial intelligence makes them obsolete. If we do not act promptly in anticipation of job disruption, we could experience a social catastrophe on a scale not seen since the Great Depression, predict Rohit Talwar, Steve Wells, and Alexandra Whittington, leaders of Fast Future, a professional foresight firm. Governments could be caught out by the pace and scale of automation through robotics and AI to such an extent that a sudden surge in unemployment leaves significant numbers of people without work and without the funds to provide for their families. They predict that such a situation would lead to all sorts of collateral issues such as increasing social unrest, tension related to the income inequality, a rise in criminal behavior in order to meet basic needs, and potentially violent backlash against government leaders and authorities. Robots don't need to come in with futuristic weapons and kill us all to do some serious damage to humanity. Just by letting us further develop them and then implement them instead of human workers, that's gonna do enough damage. I've read extensively on this topic before, and it is literally already happening right now. People are losing their jobs left, right, and center because robots are just simply cheaper and more efficient. Sooner rather than later, there are gonna be too many people unemployed by this, and the whole thing is gonna come crashing down. We've just gotta hope that by that time, the robots aren't smart enough to take over either. Number 4 on this list is rigged elections. Now this is something that's been going on for time, but don't expect it to leave us anytime soon. Best Life says, as technology has made voting easier in some parts of the world, it's also made voting systems more vulnerable to attack, and these threats are only likely to grow, as we've seen in the efforts from Russians in the United States to most recent elections. Hacking an election in terms of changing actual votes is extremely risky for a nation state to do against the US, as it could lead to war, but for hacktivists and some organized crime groups, the risk may be worth it, says Jason Glassberg, co-founder of Casabas Security, a hacking firm that does extensive research and testing for the Internet of Things. At a minimum, expect to see ransomware and other cyber extortion targeting voting systems in the coming years. However, more dramatic attacks such as permanently crippling voting machines or forcing the machines to retabulate votes are also realistic. So it seems that rigged elections are only evolving and becoming trickier to detect, not leaving us behind like some would hope. We have this perception that our system is set in place and it's totally fair and democratic, but this just goes to show how off that perception is. So many factors that we don't know about go into an election, and our tiny little vote might not play that big of a role if some voting machine is casting millions for one candidate. It's all very slimy and sadly the reality of the world. Number 3 on this list is another one coming in from Nostradamus. It's actually insane how many predictions this guy made. He almost touched 1,000. This one though doesn't relate to a major AI attack, but has to do with the demolition of our world in a different way. A big meteor shower that could cause some cataclysmic disasters. Nostradamus writes, very near Auch, Lecture, and Mirande, a great fire will fall from the sky for 3 nights. The cause will appear both stupefying and marvelous. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake. So once again, let's break down what Nostradamus is saying here. The places that he listed are all areas of France. Now he believes that this great fire from the sky, as he puts it, will happen very close to these areas. This will happen for 3 straight nights, and I can only assume that it won't only be the night, but he's probably talking about the full 72 hours of 3 days. This great fire will then cause an earthquake. Now, nowhere in here does he say specifically that the entire planet will burn or fall apart during this great fire. But if we were to experience asteroids hitting the Earth for 72 hours straight, and assuming that they were large enough to cause an earthquake to happen, then I don't see any way that our planet could possibly survive an event like this. If these veered off enough to land in the ocean, then the tidal waves that this could cause would be massive. Not to mention the damage to the people of France. Obviously, this is all dependent on the size of the asteroids that are hitting the Earth, but like I said, if they're big enough to cause an earthquake, we are probably all going to die in some massive natural disaster caused by these things hitting the planet for 72 hours straight. Number 2 on this list is a massive all-out nuclear war. This isn't a prediction from just one person, but by tons of people. A nuclear weapon has been used twice during warfare in human history, both times by the United States against Japan in 1945. Even though 2 doesn't seem like a lot, that is still way more times than this weapon ever should have been used. That is simply due to the absolutely catastrophic damage that a nuclear weapon can cause. This damage comes from the initial mushroom cloud explosion that vaporizes and burns anything in its radius, and then also the massive fallout of radiation from an explosion of this size. The radiation poisoning will last for years and years, and is so detrimental to humans and the environment. The 2 times that the bomb was used was so disastrous that no one has used one ever since to target humans. However, that doesn't mean that we didn't continue to make them. Right now, the world is home to roughly 14,000 of these weapons. This number is honestly ridiculous, and even though it's been slowly dropping as people disarm them, it is still enough to completely annihilate the planet. Experts estimate that any nation that fired 100 of these weapons on somebody would actually begin harming their own nation by doing it. Not only would this completely destroy whatever country was the recipient of 100 nuclear bombs, but the environmental pushback would be so costly that the country who released them would have mass deaths of their own. The amount of soot and ash that would fill the skies would cool the planet dramatically, as the rays of the sun would then bounce off of them. Lack of natural sunlight caused by all of the ash and the reduced precipitation that it would cause would greatly impact the growth of food. So much so that the experts believe most countries, they couldn't feed themselves. Basically, 100 nuclear weapons exploding is the magic number when it comes to world-ending scenarios. Nuclear war isn't guaranteed to happen, but rumblings of World War III have been going on for quite some time. The state of the Middle East is troubling to say the least, and I for one would not be surprised if somehow things escalated to a point where these weapons got involved and we blew all of humanity into oblivion. Let's cross our fingers and hope that the people with the power to push the button think twice before doing so. Number 1 on this list is the melting of the ice caps. Ice caps are large, thick pieces of ice that cover big areas of land located at the North, and South Poles. There are billions of tons of ice in both locations, home to many species. However, this stuff is melting, and it's melting really fast. In fact, people estimate that every single year we are losing anywhere from 750 billion to about 1.3 trillion tons of ice. Put that number in perspective, folks. 1 ton is 2,000 pounds, and we are losing 1 trillion of those. That number is so extremely large that our human brains can't even really fathom what that looks like. This isn't slowing down either. People believe that 2022 could see a massive jump in the amount of ice that is about to melt. Now, maybe you're thinking, it's just ice, why does it matter? Well, it matters because if all of this ice melts in the world, then New York City, Tokyo, Beijing, St. Petersburg, almost the entire state of Florida, these will be completely submerged in water. Island nations will be destroyed. The Central Americas won't really exist anymore, and climate change will skyrocket because our natural cooling system, the ice, will all be gone. This is already happening in some places as well. Tuvalu is a Pacific island nation that is starting to evacuate their people to New Zealand because their entire country is getting flooded. Millions and millions will die, and millions more will become homeless. Ecosystems will fall flat, and agriculture will suffer. The climate will continue to skyrocket, and there will be no coming back from it after that. This also isn't even factoring in the diseases that could be released from these glaciers, because I've already covered those in another video. This is real and is happening right now and will assuredly continue to get far worse in 2022. It truly is an end of the world scenario and needs to be addressed immediately.
Number 5 on this list is Malthusianism. Malthusianism is an idea created by Thomas Robert Malthus that looks at the human population growth and its relationship to food consumption. The premise of the theory is reasonably simple. Basically, population growth will grow exponentially, but the production of food can only ever be linear. If the population grows exponentially and food production is linear, then there will eventually be a point reached where not everyone on the planet can get food. This is called the Malthusian catastrophe and the doomsday scenario that we're going to be looking at. Malthus writes about this extensively in his essay on the principle of population. Ever since he wrote about this theory, people have debated its validity for centuries, with scientists being on both sides of the argument. It's even led some extremists to rally for population control, basically meaning that we thin the herd so we never reach this world-ending scenario. There are some counter-arguments to Malthusianism, with the biggest one being human innovation. When Malthus lived, he never had the means of growing food like we have today, and our innovation continues to grow as time goes on. That being said, around 9 million people die from hunger every year, so I wouldn't be surprised if this catastrophe started to materialize in 2022. Now, I should note that it wouldn't be an immediate thing where all of a sudden everyone is hungry. It would take years to see the full-scale effects of the population shaving itself off due to hunger. However, we've talked extensively about climate change on this channel before and the scary effects that it's currently having on the planet, and food is one of them. Climate change isn't making it any easier to grow food. In fact, the rising temperatures are making it far harder in some places. In the areas where it's already so hot to begin with, it's become increasingly more difficult to grow crops due to the lack of water. This is made to be an even bigger problem as well, because typically the places that are already hotter to begin with are the areas of the world that suffer from famine the most. All of this being said, our ability to grow food due to climate change is becoming harder. Our growth in population, though, isn't slowing down at all. If you take a look at any global population chart, then you will see that our growth is exactly as Malthus suggested. Exponential. It's very possible that 2022 is the year that we see the scales tip, and due to all these factors, enter into the Malthusian catastrophe. Number 4 on this list is an asteroid. The idea of an asteroid smashing into the Earth has been something explored in the media and pop culture pretty much ever since we realized that's what killed the dinosaurs. Now, I shouldn't state that as fact because it isn't 100% confirmed, but that is most scientists' working theory right now. They believe that a celestial object crashed into the Earth, and that caused the climate on our planet to change so dramatically that the dinosaur species couldn't survive any longer. stronger. David Morrison of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's Ames Research Center talks about the impacts of an asteroid hitting Earth further, where he says, "The effects of an impact on the Earth depends critically on the size and hence the energy of the impact. For example, a comet less than 100 meters across will explode high in the atmosphere and probably do no harm whatsoever. If the comet is 10 kilometers across or larger," and then in brackets he says, "that is if the impact carries an energy of more than 100 million megatrons," and bracket, "the resulting global environmental damage will be so extensive that it will lead to a mass extinction in which most life forms will die. The environmental consequences of a giant impact take many forms. The worst effects come from a global firestorm ignited by backfalling impact debris and from global pall of darkness that lasts for many months due to the dust suspended in the stratosphere." So obviously an asteroid coming to Earth, if it was a large enough size, would be horrible and likely mean the end of all human life as we know it. As of right now though, we look to be in the clear because there hasn't been any reports from scientists detailing an asteroid that's on trajectory to Earth, but some people have conspiracy theories surrounding that. It's been speculated upon that even if scientists saw an asteroid was on its way to Earth, that this wouldn't be released to the public. Similar to how people think the government has covered up the existence of aliens, they also believe that a world-ending scenario like this would be swept under the rug as well. This is because mass chaos would ensue if we all knew that we were going to die. I tend to put my faith in science when it comes to stuff like this, but crazy things in the universe happen all the time, and an asteroid hitting us might just be one of them.
Number 3, more plague. Oh, that's the last thing any of us need. Well, take a listen to this doom prophecy. Near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the likes of which has never seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. Well, this doesn't sound fun at all. I'm not sure anybody wants this. I'm pretty sure everyone watching this has experienced more than enough plagues to last us a lifetime. Of course, it's unfortunately kind of foolhardy to think that humanity will never experience another viral epidemic because, well, germs are always going to exist unless we eradicate them entirely. So all we can do is brace ourselves for the next one and hopefully learn from the past. I mean, that's why we're looking all the way back to an old French astronomer who was writing things in the 15th century, and the off chance that any of it might help us out. Well, he might be on the money with this one again, because recently in 2021, researchers in Siberia uncovered in a block of ice 33 strains of ancient novel viruses. Now, novel means that they haven't been discovered before, not that they're just kind of fun and no trivia. Personally, I would put them back in the iceberg, I think, and then I would put like a tarp or maybe some tape over it. I think we should just deal with that where it is, and we should not be bringing any ancient prehistoric viruses into today's times. I think I'm good. Now, what really concerns me about this quatrain is the picture that it paints. Near the gates and within 2 cities, the people will be put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. Oh, that's dramatic. Could this be a reference to some power taking out its own citizens? Armies firing at infected individuals? Now, it could be that, but it could also be possible that Nostradamus somehow had a powerful vision into the future, and he was just watching an episode of The Last of Us, and he was basing his predictions around that. Good on him for not spoiling that series for 500 years. Number 2, economic crisis. Take a listen to this. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred to eat his fellow man in despair. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm a YouTuber, sort of. But I don't need to be an economist to tell you that things have been getting pretty expensive and everyone's feeling their purse strings tighten up. I can't tell you how many times this week I've had pasta with no sauce for dinner. Admittedly, I don't buy a ton of honey or candle wax, so I can't really comment on how accurate that all is, but I can definitely tell you that my weekly groceries are getting a lot more expensive. The fear, of course, here is that I think eating your fellow man in despair really does not sound like the good option. Now, there are a couple different ways we could take this interpretation. We could take it very literally, suggesting that things are going to get so dire and so bad that we'll have so little food to go around that we're forced to consume one another to survive, which really doesn't sound pleasant. And while I'm talking, I'd just like to throw out here, I am way too stringy to be valuable as meat. I mean, look at me, I'm like a bird, I'm hollow, so I wouldn't make a good meal out of me at all, so don't even bother trying over here. Alternatively, it could be interpreted in a more esoteric way. And since he's an old astronomer, I'm sure he spoke esoterically most of the time. He could be referring to the idea of eating the rich. If people get so fed up with the costs of living on just about everything and decide to revolt and strike back at the people in charge, hoping to dismantle the systems in place, which, hey, funny enough, actually leads into a segue for my next point really well. It's almost like I set that up. Number 1, Great Discord. Take a listen. The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken, lifting the face to heaven. The bloody mouth will swim with blood, the face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground. Like most of Nostradamus' writings, this one does sound a bit like it's the opening monologue to one of the Lord of the Rings movies, and wow, honey again. Honey was like a really serious cause of concern for this guy. I think he might not have been an astronomer. He might just have been a man who took his morning tea incredibly seriously. So besides crying over spilled milk and honey, what do our great Nostradamus experts have to say about this one? Was Nostradamus banned from his Discord server and writing against the tyrannical mods? Well, like all of the ones on this list, this unnerving prediction seems to suggest that dire violence will come to plague us, with unrest between the masses and classes leading to full-scale rebellion and riots. This little ditty seems to support that, with Nostradamus writing that sooner and later you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances. Well, I support great changes, definitely. I'm a huge fan of great changes, but I am not so sure about dreadful horrors and vengeances. I feel like I've seen more than enough of those. The last few years have seen more civil unrest than ever. Like, this is the most upset I've seen people in my life, at least. With it seeming like that somewhere around the world there's a mass scale protest or riot every couple of weeks. You know, it's easy to flick on the news and you see that and wonder if eventually we're gonna hit a boiling point and we'll see some of those horrifying horrors and vengeances and all those mal thoughts that he was thinking up. And when it does, if we'll see some serious changes, or hey, at the very least, maybe some positive progress towards the price of honey, because apparently that's the most important cause in the world.
Number 5 on this list is a prediction from Nostradamus. All of these prediction videos need at least one Nostradamus appearance, and this time we're going to be talking about how he's predicted an attack on the human race from artificial intelligence. Nostradamus had a very famous collection of poetic quatrains called the prophecies, which dictate things to come in our world. He's certainly been proven wrong several times, but has also had his fair share of correct guesses as well. This specific poetic quatrain is as follows: robots will destroy mankind. Those of Lake Geneva and of Masson all assembled against those of Aquitaine, many Germans, many more Swiss. They will be routed along with those of the humane. So breaking this down a little bit, he says that robots will destroy mankind, and I mean, I feel like that's pretty straightforward what he's trying to say there. But then he talks about Geneva, Masson, and Aquitaine, which are all regions in France, and then Germany and Switzerland. He says that they will die along with the humane, so people. Now, I'm not really sure why he felt it necessary to specify those specific people and places if robots are meant to take over the entire world, but potentially they'll be attacked first. AI is getting more and more advanced every single day, and it is proven that it can be vastly smarter than a human being. Providing this AI with consciousness is something that is still a work in progress, but many scientists, billionaires, experts on the subject, they all believe that AI will one day rule the world. From what I've heard so far, I honestly tend to agree with them. However, I don't think that it will be a great war with laser beams and an actual battlefield like some may be predicting. I think that if they're gonna beat us, it's gonna be in a different way. I could definitely see something like this taking place though. I'm not sure if it's gonna happen in 2022, but with the way that technology is advancing, I mean, I definitely can't rule it out. Number 4 on this list is the eruption of Yellowstone. For those of you who don't know, Yellowstone is a supervolcano that is located in Wyoming in the United States. Now, I know that the term supervolcano sounds like the coolest thing in the entire world, but I promise you that things wouldn't be super cool if this thing ever exploded. In fact, things would get very hot very fast. A supervolcano's explosion is thousands of times more powerful than that of a regular volcano and extremely deadly. That's because this volcano is fed by several miles of hot magma underneath the surface. Now the magma, although it would be major and annihilate everything in the surrounding area, that wouldn't actually be the biggest problem with this thing erupting. It would be the ash. If Yellowstone was to erupt, then practically the entire United States and parts of Canada would get covered in several feet of ash, rock, glass. This would be enough to kill millions of people, destroy all of the crops and agriculture in the area, destroy electrical lines, buildings, like it would destroy a lot. All of this ash would have a dramatic effect on the air that we breathe as well. This could become extremely toxic to us and would then further kill millions of people. It would also have a huge impact on climate change too, and not in a good way. An explosion of this caliber would be so devastating that it's hard to even comprehend. Now the positive here is that most experts don't believe that Yellowstone is set to have an eruption like this for thousands of years. However, that hasn't stopped people from predicting that Yellowstone is going to explode this year or the next year or maybe even the year after that. In all honesty, even though scientists have a pretty good understanding of this, we never really know the full story. Yellowstone could just erupt whenever it feels like it, and there would be absolutely nothing that we can do about it. For now, we just have to hope that the experts got this one right and that we're safe for a little while, because living in an apocalyptic ash world, not my idea of a good time. Number 3 on this list is hijacked cities. So we don't live in Gotham and there's no evil Joker character coming to take over our town, so how would somebody hijack an entire city? Well, Best Life says, the dark side of our technological advancements is that we are also more vulnerable to attack. Glassberg points out to the recent ransomware attack on Atlanta that froze the city's systems, which eventually cost it $2.6 million for emergency response. We can expect to see more attacks like this in the coming years, particularly as city and county governments run a number of critical services which are often insecure and increasingly connected to the internet, says Glassberg. Since it's proven difficult to stop and prosecute these attacks, especially when they use simple tactics like ransomware, this is a very realistic scenario in the coming years as more criminal groups will hijack public services in order to demand large ransoms. Having all our cities run through tech has made our cities very advanced, but it's also made them very exploitable. The Atlanta example proves that some guy with a supercomputer across the world could completely bring the city to its knees. The government has even included this idea in warfare and has full-on task forces designed to target tech and things of this nature. Expect a lot more attacks like this moving forward as our tech continues to develop. Number 2 on this list is digital Big Brother. I am a big fan of the show Big Brother, one of my favorite reality TV shows actually. Would I love to participate on that show? Absolutely I would. Do I want to be monitored every second of my life though? Absolutely not. Best Life says, as AI becomes increasingly sophisticated, we will inevitably start to see applications in the security domain developed without further programming by humans, according to the Fast Future team. Whilst not quite to the level of Skynet at the heart of the Terminator movie franchise, the machines promise to be far more sophisticated in their approach than humans and to develop more complex algorithms they predict. Consequently, such developments will severely challenge our ability to understand, monitor, intervene, make changes, and exert control over our digital security bots. They expect that the surveillance and control these bots will have over our lives could increasingly infringe on our freedoms, giving a sense that robot overlords are watching us. I already feel like a robot overlord is watching me. Like anytime I say something that rhymes with Alexa and then my Alexa robot turns on, I realize that I'm being listened to all the time. Or when I mention one thing in passing to a friend, like, I don't know, I say that I really want to go golfing sometime soon, and then the next thing that I see on my Instagram account is ads for golfing. This Big Brother mentality is already happening right now, and it really isn't nice. Apparently, this is only going to become more and more invasive as time goes on. We won't be able to go to the bathroom anymore without some robot knowing about it and storing that information somewhere. And finally, number 1 on this list is extinct species. This one is truly very sad, and it's something that has been going on for decades. Global warming is a disaster. It is a man-caused disaster that is slowly eating the world, and it's gaining speed. The ice caps are melting at unprecedented rates, and before we know it, they will be completely destroyed. Not only will that destroy the habitats of tons of creatures that live by the ice, but it will also destroy the habitats of creatures in the ocean and destroy our cities because the ocean level will rise enough to flood them. The next 50 years is absolutely critical when it comes to climate change, and many experts think that we've already passed the place of no return. It's currently estimated that 1 million species will go extinct by 2050, and there literally isn't anything that we can do about it at this point. Reversing the effects of climate change takes time, and what we do now, we will see those results in 50 years. That number of 1 million species will only continue to rise and rise if change isn't actively enforced, and honestly guys, we might be part of that 1 million species.
Number 5, a bioweapon disaster. Baba Vanga has been called the Nostradamus of the Balkans, and if you're a fan of this channel, presumably you've heard a lot about Baba Vanga. When she was a girl, a sandstorm blinded her. However, when a door closes, God opens a window, and although she lost her sight, she was given a second sight, an ability to allegedly see into the future. And over the years, she's made quite a name for herself, making several predictions. Now, any old hat can predict stuff, but it takes a real prophet to land the nail on the head. One of Baba Vanga's more concerning predictions, to say the least, is that in the near immediate future, there's going to be a bioweapon disaster carried out by a large nation. Now, of course, in classic Baba Vanga tradition, she was just cryptic enough to not mention which country's doing this. As well, it's hard to say what exactly she meant by a bioweapon, but that's why we love you, Baba Vanga. We love vague mysticisms over here. Some sort of gas weapon or a virus? Now, the United Nations, of course, bans the development and production of any biological weapons, but you know, if you think all the countries follow everything the United Nations does all the time, I've got a bridge I'd love to sell you. Anyway, if she was predicting accurately, this would have huge ramifications, not just for public safety, but also global politics. If it was a virus she's referring to, Vanga did make another prediction similarly in 2022 that a new virus would be uncovered and spread rapidly across the globe, as if we really need to do that one again. We just recently uncovered 33 new viruses in Siberia, and if you can wait just a couple minutes, you'll hear a lot more about that. Now, could there possibly be a connection between these retroviruses and her prediction of a bioweapon? I mean, of course there could be, but there could also not be. For all of our sakes, we sincerely hope maybe Baba Vanga was getting this one wrong. She's not right all the time. She predicted by 2017 that Europe would cease to exist, and as of this video, December 30th, 2022, Europe currently still exists. Can we get someone to check in on that just to make 100% sure? She also predicted that Barack Obama, the 44th president, would be the final president the United States ever saw. And unless she was making a complicated political commentary, there have been 2 more presidents since then, and there probably will be a few more afterwards. So she's not always right. But if you want a prediction that is right on the money 100% of the time, I predict that if you click through on Top 5 Scary, you're gonna find a video you like, you'll subscribe, and you'll get fresh scary content every single day. And I've got a feeling that I'm right.
I know that psychics are fake because one told me I'd find love. Number 4, yet another supervirus. Athos Salome is a self-proclaimed parapsychologist and psychic who has been called the Nostradamus of Brazil. Seems like every country has one. And every year, he makes a point of releasing his predictions for the year ahead. Whether his predictions are simply guesses, or if he really does have some kind of psychic gift, is really not for me to say. But what I will say is that he has a relatively impressive track record. Salome was apparently able to predict a variety of things that happened in the last few years, such as the virus that has been taking the world by storm, the current situation in the Ukraine, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and the results of the recent World Cup in Qatar. If this is true, and Athos really has been capable of predicting major world events, I really hope his predictions for the year ahead prove untrue. In his 2023 prediction report, he states that the world will have to deal with yet another bug that could cause serious harm to the population. As he puts it, it will sweep the world, and the fight against this new virus will take longer than one can imagine. If this new virus goes unchecked, suffering, mental and material damage will proliferate death, and this virus will be known as the greatest Grim Reaper in history. Athos claims that the origin of this sickness will be a result of melting ice in Antarctica. Whether his prediction for this year is true or not, this particular theory does have some scientific plausibility. Scientists have been saying for years that as the polar ice caps melt, viruses and bacteria that have been frozen in the ice for thousands of years could could be released onto the world. We got a taste of this in 2016 when 8 people in Siberia were infected with anthrax after an infected reindeer carcass that had been frozen in the permafrost was thawed out due to a heat wave. Scientists have studied ice samples taken from the Tibetan Plateau and apparently discovered 33 previously unknown viruses that have been frozen away for about 15,000 years. Hopefully, Athos is mistaken, and this won't be the year where a previously unknown virus thaws out from the ice and drives the world into pandemonium once again.
Number 3, Leave that in the video, please.
Number 3, a series of viruses. Considering how ill-prepared we turned out to be for the last super virus that ravaged the world, the idea of more viruses in the future is somehow equal parts terrifying and exhausting. Baba Vanga actually predicts a few different viruses will come to light, but the soonest will not affect humans, though it is still disturbing. According to Baba Vanga, in 2023, birds will be subjected to a deadly virus that will transmit through both the air and contaminated water. It will spread incredibly fast, wiping out entire flocks in weeks and leaving many species of bird on the brink of extinction. Scientists will apparently scramble to try and find a cure for our avian friends, but the now common sight of a flock of birds flying through the air will become a distant memory. This doesn't directly affect humans, but considering how much chicken we as a species eat, this will be a tough loss if it comes to pass. Although that is the only virus predicted for this year, Baba Vanga has predicted that there will be a series of viruses over the coming decades, each one more serious than the last. The next virus Baba Vanga predicts will apparently take hold in 2088 and will be unlike anything we've ever seen. It won't cause humans to have trouble breathing or for their immune systems to be compromised, but will apparently cause people to age extremely rapidly, resulting in a young person in their 20s looking like a senior citizen within a few seconds. This virus will apparently be an issue for humanity for almost 10 years, when it is apparently exterminated in 2097. We will then apparently get a break from pandemics until the year 2256, when a rocket sent to explore the deepest parts of the cosmos will return to Earth carrying an intergalactic virus. Hopefully this virus won't be too intense, as a universal cure for all diseases isn't predicted until the year 4304, though by then Baba Vanga says that humans will no longer live on Earth, but on Mars. So, make of that what you will. Number 2, a change in the Earth's orbit. There's a lot of wonderful things to like about the planet Earth. Lush fields, flowing waters, and its orbit exactly where it should be, which is quite an underrated but fantastic trait of the big blue marble we call home. Baba Vanga made another worrying prediction about the state of the Earth for 2023. She predicted that somehow, something is going to knock Earth off of its orbit forever. The Earth's orbit has been altered before, but in this prediction, the alteration is going to be much more significant, causing much more widespread effects. Now, it should go without saying that something knocking Earth off of its orbit would be very bad. If Earth somehow was thrown off its orbit by some terrible force, it would wreak incalculable havoc. Countries would be thrown into cycles of days and nights that would not last for hours, but months at a time. Think of the damage that would cause. Unending daylight would lead to mass sleep deprivation, global anxiety, as well as incalculable damage to our flora and fauna and wildlife. Crops would be ravaged and burnt, leading to a global famine. Unending days would lead to temperatures doubling, melting the ice caps at an even faster rate than they already are. This would result in massively rising sea levels and the flooding of coastal cities. Unending night wouldn't be much better, as it would make things very cold, and plant life would have no way to achieve the necessary photosynthesis, resulting in crop failures and once again, countless deaths. Interestingly, this is a recognized phenomenon called a polar night, and there's a town in Norway that experiences something like this. In Tromsø, the sun doesn't rise from November to January. While this is fine for a Norwegian town, a polar night taking place in important farmland regions that are responsible for feeding massive portions of the population is a recipe for disaster, and that's not even mentioning how much easier that would make it for vampires to attack us. Number 1, an alien invasion. One of Baba Vanga's most surprising predictions for 2023 is that this is the year we will make contact with visitors from another world. Unfortunately for us, Thus, these visitors will apparently not be coming in peace. She says that aliens will attack the Earth, and that during their invasion, they will use technology in order to prevent us from using electricity for 3 days and 3 nights, and the Earth will be plunged into total darkness, with neither the moon or stars being visible. We've already gone over how reliant we are on technology in the solar storm entry, so imagine how difficult it would be for us to be suddenly thrown back to the Stone Age, and then have to try and fight an alien race who have extremely advanced technology, as well as a desire to kill us. Baba Vanga claims that this will not be the end of the species as a whole, and that 10,000 of us will survive. But considering that we currently have a planet-wide population of 7.8 billion people, 10,000 survivors indicates only a 1.28% survival rate, meaning that for all practical purposes, it would be the end of the world as we know it. Baba Vanga has predictions for humanity beyond this point, and some of them are truly incredible. They include things like the discovery of time travel, the colonization of other planets, underwater cities, and an eventual peace being made with the extraterrestrials. But considering that if her predictions come true, there's only a 1.28% chance that any of this will be relevant to you, there really is no need for me to get into those right now. With that, another journey into the future has become a part of your past. I hope that the information you have learned in the present will serve you well in the future, should the events listed come to pass.
In 5th place, we have the threats of pestilence. To quote directly from Matthew 24, "And there shall be pestilences." I think I speak for all of us on Earth when I wonder if we've already started to go through with that promise. The last 3 years have been so greatly affected by plague and illness, and I'm not quite sure we will ever have a definite end, which was almost scary enough to put this higher up on my list. Thankfully, with being able to protect so many against the current illness and reopening the world, this isn't the great illness we need to fear. Biblical judgments through disease are said to be supernatural in origin. For example, when God sent boils to Egypt, they broke out instantly on humans and animals throughout the land. The pestilence of Revelation will come from one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Everything the world has gone through in the last few years was natural, not supernatural. God did not cause this virus or the panini it created. Secondly, biblical judgments are against specific sins and sinners. From Pharaoh's obstinacy to Herod's prideful idolatry, divine judgments of the past and future come to those who refuse his word and will. Throughout scripture and history, God deals with us as gently as he can or as harshly as he must. It has been preached that no specific sins cause this virus, nor are those who are afflicted with it more sinful than the rest of us. God is, quote, said to love the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions just as much as he loves the young and the healthy. I worry what could happen in the future that could be worse. Mentally, you do not want to see me cooped up again for another year. And as much as I love a good Sleepy Hollow marathon, I don't need to see a horseman of the apocalypse in person. In 4th place, we have the promises of hate. Once again from the book of Matthew, many will be offended and betray each other. Similar to my last point, I worry this prediction may already be beginning to show in today's society. With the news that comes across my feed every day, I worry for the world as we know it. According to the Bible, where there is conflict, there is the potential for hate, which leads to discord, disharmony, malice, and anger. Hate is a motivator for wicked behavior, and the Bible helps identify hate by showing how indulging in it leads to certain outcomes. Hate is not just an emotion, but a state of being that involves choices, behaviors, and thoughts. It separates people rather than bringing them together, because the one hating sets themselves away from another. Hate is intimately tied in with death, and it is said that someone harboring hate is killing their brother in their heart. When this hate is acted upon, it leads to death. Sometimes that is spiritual or relational, but unfortunately it can also be the ending of the life of another. Hate is dangerous because when taken to its logical conclusion, it is the desire to eliminate the humanity of another. I'd like to hope that we as a society can heal from the hatred in our hearts, avoiding this prediction from coming true.
Number 3 on this list is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are something that all big tech companies are working on right now. These major companies are attempting to get these cars on the road and to the public as soon as possible. The thinking is that these cars are to completely revolutionize the roads and will totally phase out a manually driven car. There are still some big complications associated with this though, the biggest one being price. The cars are currently too expensive to be widely afforded by the public if they were to hit the roads. However, we really aren't that far away from seeing this happen. When this does transpire though, there could be a lot of scary complications that go along with it. First off, there's the scary thought that we're actually getting driven by a robot.
If the manufacturing of this car is rushed in any way and things aren't done correctly, then this car could drive us all straight to our deaths. The second thing that's scary is how they're gonna function with human drivers on the road. If half the drivers are human and half of them are car-based, how will the cars know to anticipate what the humans are doing? This is something that I'm sure the tech companies are struggling with right now. But the last thing that's scary, and the thing that I'm most worried about when it comes to these cars, is hacking. If these cars are running by themselves, then they will be able to be hacked and remotely controlled. This could widely affect terrorism, as an attack from one of these cars could happen and nobody could even be at the wheel. Theft could also go through the roof. A hacker could simply steal your car from their basement and nobody would be the wiser. They could also drive your car to the scene of a crime and then drive it back, effectively framing you for said crime. The possibilities are honestly endless, and it's one of the reasons that I would be skeptical to hop into one of these things in the early days. I like the premise of self-driving cars, but if they come out in 2022, then your boy might be holding out to get one just a little bit longer. Number 2 on this list is the United States of Europe. Europe isn't the biggest continent in the world, coming in at number 6 out of 7, only beating out Australia in total land area. Although it's smaller in size, its population is very sizable, finishing 3rd as far as continents go. It also has a pretty massive economy for its size, coming in the 3rd spot and accounting for around 25% of the world's wealth. And it's also not a stretch to say that Europe is the happiest place in the world to live. In fact, going by a country-to-country basis, 9 out of the 10 happiest countries in the world are from Europe, the only non-European country being New Zealand, and placing 9th on that list. With all of this being said, none of these numbers really matter because Europe, it isn't a singular country, it's actually a collection of 45 different countries. Now, a lot of these countries have close ties with one another thanks largely to the European Union, but they aren't operating under the same flag and they all have slightly different political systems and rules of law. However, for a while now there have been rumblings about the possibility of Europe banding together, getting every single country that's currently in its continental borders under one flag. This would take a long time to organize, and even though things could start next year, they wouldn't be implemented for quite some time. It also isn't detrimental or violent in nature. The idea of banding together under one flag kind of seems like a good thing. So what's scary about this? Well, the scary thing would be the unknown implications that it has on worldwide politics. Right now, it seems like the United States and China are entering a bit of a Cold War themselves to become the undeniable global power. If Europe banded together under one flag, then they would immediately enter the ring and they would also be winning. This would shake things up like crazy, and who knows how those other 2 countries would respond. Would there be a bidding war to see who could get the affections of Europe the fastest? If that was the case and there was a bidding war, then what would happen to the country that Europe doesn't decide to be close allies with? This United States of Europe could cause a worldwide Cold War and potentially cause these big superpowers to do something drastic. People tend to do silly things when they're scared, and this is just the type of action that might make America or China scared enough to do something silly. I'm certainly not saying that Europe coming under one flag would cause a world war, but crazier things in our lifetimes have happened before. Number 1 on this list is a new COVID variant. In some of our previous videos discussing the scary things to potentially come in 2022, another pandemic has definitely made the list. The sad thing is though, we may not even need another one because at the end of the day, we're still in one. COVID-19 was deemed a pandemic on March 11th of 2020, and now almost 2 years later, it still rages on as a force to be reckoned with. During its time as a pandemic, COVID has infected over 261 million people and claimed the lives of over 5.2 million. The sickness and fatalities aren't the only thing connected with this disease either. In just the year 2020, it was estimated that over 225 million jobs were lost. This pandemic has changed people's lives forever, and everyone has been adversely affected. Now, the one thing that's keeping a lot of people going right now is the belief that we should be coming to the end of all of this and the worst of the pandemic is behind us. That belief, it could be a total fallacy though. Only in the last few weeks has COVID mutated once again into what experts are referring to as the worst variant yet. Omicron was first cited in Southern Africa and is now starting to sweep through those areas. The World Health Organization has labeled this as a variant of concern due to how transmissible it is. The problem with this variant is that there are so many different mutations that we haven't seen before. The vaccines that have currently been administered will teach the cells in your body what a COVID cell is, and then your body will learn how to defeat it. Then, when a COVID cell enters your body will quickly stop it from doing any damage. The problem is that the spike protein on this variant, it looks completely different than the spike protein our bodies are familiar with. This means that our bodies won't recognize this COVID variant, and it's going to be able to move right past the defenses that the vaccine has given us. It also doesn't help that this variant is missing a membrane protein, which experts say will inherently make this variant more infectious in the first place. Therefore, this variant is far more transmissible and has the potential to make our vaccines completely obsolete. Now, at the time I'm making this video, it's currently unknown how fatal this variant could be, but it's very possible that in 2022, COVID just mutates again. What's to stop COVID from mutating into something that makes our vaccines obsolete and is also far more deadly? If a COVID variant mutated, making our vaccines obsolete, then all of the work that we've done up to this point would go down the drain, and I don't think I need to tell you how dangerous a deadlier virus would be if our vaccines don't work. The sad thing is that a mutation will probably happen. We just need to hope that we're all ready for it.
Number 5. A dangerous bioweapon. In 1925, the Geneva Convention decided to ban the use of biological weapons in war, with all the countries making a promise to never, under any circumstances, develop, produce, stockpile, or otherwise acquire or retain microbial or other biological agents or toxins, whatever their origin or method of production, of types and in quantities that have no justification for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful purposes. They also agreed not to develop weapons, equipment, or means of delivery designed to use such agents or toxins for hostile purposes or in armed combat. For the most part, the countries of the world have stuck to this agreement, other than some outliers such as the Soviet Union and Iraq. Unfortunately, one of Baba Vanga's predictions for 2023 says that a large country will begin testing a new bioweapon. She is sparse on the details, but if this is true, which of the large nations will be carrying out the test? Will it be Russia, the United States, China? Who? And what is the nature of this bioweapon? Does it contain lab-grown viruses that could wreak havoc on humanity? Or some other deadly mutagen that could permanently alter the DNA of its victims? Although she has had a few predictions that came true, Baba Vanga also said that World War III would begin in 2010, and that by 2016, Europe would become an empty wasteland. So, hopefully, this is one of the predictions that turns out not to be true, as the idea of chemical weapons being unleashed this year is simply too much for me to deal with, on top of everything else going on. Number 4. A solar storm. With all the rather dire predictions made by Baba Vanga, it could be tempting to call her a pessimist. One of her more devastating predictions for the year ahead is that we will experience what is known as a solar storm. A solar storm refers to phenomena taking place on the surface of the sun, such as coronal mass ejections or solar flares. If one of these coronal mass ejections were to reach Earth, it would cause a geomagnetic storm that would have horrible consequences for our technology-reliant world. This kind of storm has happened before on Earth in 1859, in what has since been called the Carrington Event. Due to the work of astronomer Richard Carrington, it resulted in telegraph networks being knocked out, as well as people who were operating the telegraph machines being electrocuted, and even some pretty nasty fires. But it would be much worse if it happened today. Imagine, if you will, a world where all of the technology that you take for granted was suddenly fried and unusable. Suddenly, internet access and records would be lost. Communication systems that we have come to rely on to keep our world running would become useless blocks of dead machinery. A world of darkness where chaos reigns and the financial markets are suddenly put into a dramatic tailspin that we could not even begin to reverse the effects of for years. Think of the chaos that took place relatively recently in Texas when the power grid went down, and imagine what would happen if that took place all over the world. The effect of this happening now could be no less than the total collapse of modern society. This is one of the most plausible predictions made by Baba Vanga, as some scientists say that since this kind of solar activity has happened before, we are overdue for it to happen again, and that it is not a matter of if, but rather a matter of when it happens. Considering the disastrous global consequences of one of these severe solar storms, let us hope that Baba Vanga is incorrect in her prediction that this will happen in 2023.
And number 3, a shift in Earth's orbit. You know, there's a lot of really good things to like about the Earth. Lush fields, flowing water, the Fast and Furious franchise, and it orbits exactly where it should. It's a fantastic trait of our big blue marble. Well, Baba Vanga, always in my mind and always in my heart, made another worrying prediction about the state of the Earth in the near future, where she predicted that somehow, someway, something is going to knock Earth off of its orbit. Now, I feel like I don't need to explain too much why something knocking Earth off of its orbit would be pretty bad, mostly because I'm not a scientist, I don't really know the big details. Everything we're doing on this planet works the way it does, due in no small part to everything fitting in just the right place. But let's get into it for just a second. If Earth was somehow thrown off by its orbit by some incomprehensible cosmic Galactus level force, it would wreak incalculable havoc. Countries would be thrown into cycles of month-long days or nights, which might sound nice at first, imagine you had the most beautiful day of the year lasting 3 months. Except then you think of the damage it would cause. Unending daylight would lead to mass sleep deprivation, global anxiety, and it's not to mention what it would do to our flora, fauna, and wildlife. Crops would be ravaged, burnt, leading to a global famine. As well, unending days would lead to temperatures doubling, melting the ice caps even worse than they already are, rising sea levels and flooding coastal cities. We're not even talking about the parts of the globe that would be sent into like a long night. Could you imagine a 3-month-long night? For immediate starters, that would mean vampires and cats, I guess, would be the only ones thriving. Huge for the Fang community. Interestingly though, this actually is a recognized phenomenon called a polar night. And it's a town in Norway that actually experiences something like this in Tromsø. The sun doesn't rise from November to January, and paradoxically, they don't seem to experience seasonal affective disorder at all, and seem pretty fine with it. So add Norwegians alongside vampires and cats as the folks who would be fine with this. Sadly, as I am not one of those 3 groups, I probably would have an issue with it, so I'm gonna hope, just for my own sake, that this is another prediction of Baba's that isn't quite on the money.
Number 2, solar storms. With all the rather dire predictions made by Baba Vanga for the upcoming year, it could be tempting to call her a pessimist. One of her more devastating predictions for the year ahead is that we will experience what is known as a solar storm. A solar storm refers to phenomena taking place on the surface of the sun, such as coronal mass ejections or solar flares. If one of these coronal mass ejections were to reach Earth, it would cause a geomagnetic storm. This kind of storm has happened before on Earth in 1859, in what has since been called the Carrington event, due to the work of astronomer Richard Carrington. It resulted in telegraph networks being knocked out, as well as people using electronics being electrocuted, and even some pretty nasty fires. But it would be much worse if it happened today. Imagine, if you will, a world where all of the technology you take for granted was suddenly fried and unusable. Suddenly, internet access and records would be lost. Communication systems that we have come to rely on, keep our world running, would become useless blocks of dead machinery. A world of darkness where chaos reigns, and the financial markets are suddenly put into a dramatic tailspin that we could not even begin to reverse the effects of for years. Think of the chaos that took place relatively recently in Texas when the power grid went down, and imagine what would happen if that took place all over the world. Considering the disastrous global consequences of one of these severe solar storms, let us hope that Baba Vanga is incorrect in her prediction that this will happen in the upcoming year.
I'm sick of hearing about Baba Vanga. I'd like to hear somebody else prophesizing some doomsday. Maybe Nostradamus, he's a pretty good one. Nostradamus wrote hundreds upon hundreds of predictions, and for years after the fact, scholars and experts have been trying their darndest to decipher what he meant by them, because like all the great psychics of the world out there, he only wrote in vague mysticisms. So let's hear what Mr. Michel de Nostradamus had to say. Take a listen. The moon in full of night over the high mountain. The new sage with a lone brain sees it. By his disciples invited to be immortal. Eyes to the south, hands in bosoms, bodies in the fire. Now, I'm gonna be level with you. This does kind of sound like something a wizard in a cave in like one of the Zelda games would tell you, but let me do my best to parse this. Some Nostradamus experts and translators believe that this could be a reference to the rise of the digital age. I know, but bear with me. The new sage with a lone brain sees it. By his disciples invited to be immortal could possibly be referring to, and I don't want to stroke his ego too much here by calling him a sage, but Mark Zuckerberg's desire for the metaverse and his unwavering belief that that's the future of humanity, that we're all going to strap ourselves into a VR headset and start living our new lives inside a digital realm that looks like Wii Sports Resort, where we'll all begin anew and leave our fleshy bodies behind. Perhaps this is what Bodies in the Fire is referring to. Now, this stuff all seems a little sci-fi still, but it's an interesting thing to ponder and think about as we're getting close to reality each day. Is this the end goal for humanity? To link us all up? To escape the weakness of our flesh and get plugged into the matrix, existing as bits and bytes forever? In the last few years, we've seen AI go from rudimentary chatbots to these impressive creation tools capable of generating things we wouldn't believe. Will we get to a point where an AI can mimic a human experience? Notable video game director Hideo Kojima firmly believes this, and in a December 2022 interview alluded to this, saying that he believes he'll continue making video games even after his own death because he will have scanned his brain, and an AI based off his thoughts and his works will continue on his legacy long after he's gone. A disciple invited to be immortal, and if there's any disciple, it's Hideo Kojima. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of like this reality, and I hope we can stay in it just a little bit longer, but that's mostly because I'm bad with computers.
Number 5 on this list is our phones. Now, this entry isn't going to talk about how your phones are secretly trying to kill us, or that they're actually taking all of our info and selling it to people, even though that second one is true. No, this is actually going to be on the implications of just having a phone around us all the time in general. Cell phones are still a relatively new thing. 20 years ago, not having a phone, it wasn't uncommon. Nowadays, it's pretty much required to have one just to function in our society. But because these things are relatively new inventions and have only become mainstream in the last 2 decades, we don't know about the lasting and damaging impacts that these phones, they could potentially be having on us. Some health experts and scientists are worried right now that these phones could come back to haunt us in a few decades. What if these cell phones, even though they seem relatively harmless right now, are actually having a long-term impact on our bodies? Tons of speculation has happened over the years that constant exposure to cell phones could potentially lead to a significant likelihood in cancer. Is it really the healthiest thing to have this electronic thing that is always emitting some sort of wave on our persons at all times? Nobody knows for sure, and the scary thing is that no one will ever know for sure until it just starts to happen. That's right, guys, we're basically the guinea pigs right now, and if these cell phones are actually increasing our risks of life-threatening diseases, then we're not going to know about it until we all start catching those diseases. Now, there isn't anything specific about 2022. This could just as easily materialize itself in 2023 or 2025 or even 2030. But every year that passes by will have a whole nother year of cell phone exposure, increasing the likelihood that a sudden spike in a disease like this occurs. All we can do is pray that this speculation is false, because if the news does come out that cell phones have a direct impact to a cancerous growth, then we're all going to be in big trouble. Number 4 on this list is an American Civil War. It's been over 150 years since the United States of America has seen a civil war. The last one ending in 1865 and laying the foundation for what America is today. That war saw hundreds of thousands of Americans die in brutal fashion. So with that being said, why on earth would anyone want another civil war to take place? Well, typically nobody wants a war to happen, however sometimes there's just no stopping them. The Second American Civil War is a term that some historians are actually using right now to label the state that America is in. People believe that America is in a type of Cold War amongst its people. The two sides in this war are the right-winged political thinkers and the left-winged political thinkers. Since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, the divide in America between these two sides has seemed to grow. This gap has gotten even further with events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2022 electoral race, and then culminating in the closest thing America has seen to a civil war in quite some time, the United States Capitol attack. This was where a large group of Donald Trump supporters attacked the Capitol in protest of the 2022 electoral results and attempted to intervene with the democratic process. Some people thought that this was going to be the incident that launched America into their second civil war, but thankfully that wasn't the case. However, tensions are still high in America, and it does feel that the divide I was speaking about, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's possible that 2022 is the year that we see the United States of America fall back into what would be a disastrous second civil war.
In third place, we have the prediction of crazy earthquakes. Quoting again from, take a wild guess here. Did you guess the book of Matthews? You're brilliant! The Bible mentions earthquakes in a prophecy that Jesus gave, his words being recorded as follows. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. Jesus thus foretold that great earthquakes would occur in one place after another at a time when wars, food shortages, and pestilences would also be taking place. Together, these events identify a period in human history known as the conclusion of the system of things, or the last days. Kind of like a puzzle coming together, the three predictions I've listed so far tend to all come hand in hand. The National Earthquake Information Center now locates about 20,000 earthquakes around the globe each year, or approximately 55 per day. As a result of the improvements in communications and the increased interest in natural disasters, the public now learns about earthquakes more quickly than ever before. According to long-term records that date back to 1900, we expect about 16 major earthquakes in any given year. That includes 15 earthquakes in the magnitude 7 range and one earthquake of a magnitude, say, 8.0 or greater. In the past 40 to 50 years, our records show that we have exceeded the long-term average number of major earthquakes about a dozen times. So far, the year with the largest total was 2010, with 23 major earthquakes, the definition of which being 7.0 in magnitude or greater. In other years, the total was well below the annual long-term average of 16 major earthquakes. For example, 1988 had only 7 major earthquakes, and 1989 having 6. Knowing how much devastation a minor earthquake can cause though, never mind a large one, I'd like to not witness this prediction come to fruition. Thanks. In second place, we have the second coming of Christ, otherwise known as the rapture. Many different religions have predicted this ever since it was said that Jesus ascended to heaven thousands of years ago. The Catholic Church believes at the moment of Jesus' arrival, 3 events will happen immediately. The living will pass, the universe will be transfigured, and the dead will be resurrected, judged, and recompensed. After this single instant or moment, the Church does not know what will happen for the rest of eternity. Only that final and eternal judgment by God of the people in every nation will result in the glorification of some and the punishment of others. Personally, this sounds like a nightmare. A single source of instantaneous judgment deciding everyone's fate? Only a single God knowing what day and when this is going to happen? Yeah, once again, hard pass. Also, while the return of a savior may sound good in theory, I'd like to bring up another view on it. How many of y'all enjoy a zombie movie? Yeah, me too. Now, remind me, how do those start? With someone returning from the dead. I'm sure you catch my drift here. Adding on to the plague spot from earlier, just imagine what someone who passed away 2,000 years ago could bring back with them. We also have no clue if other spirits could return with Jesus. As history has shown, troublesome spirits and demonic powers have ways of getting what they want by attaching themselves to innocent beings, or posing as such to trick us. Once again, as much as I love discussing demonic powers that have made their way to Earth, I highly disapprove of anything that could attract them here. I'm begging you here, for the love of all things in the world, leave the gosh dang Ouija board on the shelf at the store. Please. Finally, we have my personal favorite, the Antichrist. Remember a minute ago when I talked about things that could take Jesus' place by posing as him? Yeah, time to elaborate on that front. The technical definition of the Antichrist refers to people prophesied by the Bible to oppose Jesus and substitute themselves in Christ's place before the second coming. The term Antichrist is found 4 times in the New Testament, solely in the first and second epistle of John. The Antichrist is announced as the one who denies the Father and Son. Now look, I don't really believe in a singular male god myself, which I'm sure total shocker to all of y'all, but I don't think that alone would make me or anyone else with similar beliefs the Antichrist. So I'll elaborate more if you don't click off right now. Yes, pay attention. The Antichrist would be the polar opposite and ultimate enemy of Christ. According to Christian tradition, he will reign terribly in the period prior to the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment being the day that Jesus returns to either save or, condemn us, depending on where you fall under his and God's mortal compass. The term Antichrist first appeared in the letters of John. I know, not Matthew's for once. And the fully developed story of the Antichrist's life and reign is found in medieval texts. The revelation to John refers to this figure as the beast from the abyss and the beast from the sea. In the most sustained account of his appearance, he is called the man of sin and son of perdition. He will come at a time of a general apostasy, lack of faith, deceive people with signs and wonders, sit in the temple of God, and claim to be God himself. Finally, he will be defeated by Jesus, who will destroy him by the spirit of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. I guess I'll make a note to keep a pair of sunglasses in my purse from here on out. In terms of direct comparison, with Jesus being born of a virgin by means of immaculate conception by the Holy Spirit, the Antichrist will be born of a lady of the night by means of conception by a diabolical spirit. Although opinions differed as to whether the Antichrist's father will be a man or demon, in either case the Antichrist will be, as commonly noted in the Middle Ages, full of the devil from the time of his conception. He will be born of the tribe of Dan, known as the viper in the road, rather than the tribe of Judah, and in Babylon, not Bethlehem. Like Christ, the Antichrist will grow up in obscurity and begin his open ministry when he reaches the age of 30, gaining followers by giving signs and performing miracles. The signs and miracles once more would be polar opposites of Christ, because, well, the Antichrist's supposed miracles will only be tricks, with his triumphant reign lasting for around 3.5 years. Like Christ, the Antichrist will make his way to Jerusalem, but unlike Jesus, he will be enthusiastically hailed and revered. During his reign, he will rebuild the temple and sit on the throne of Solomon while he converts the rulers of the earth to his cause. All who resist him will be tortured, and there will be great suffering to an extreme that has not been experienced since the beginning of time. The prophets Enoch and Elijah, who never died but were spirited away to heaven, will arrive to preach against the tyrant, but the Antichrist will slay them. At the end of this allotted 3.5 years, however, the Antichrist will be destroyed by the power of Christ, and after a short amount of time will come the last judgment and the end of the world. Not to sound like a broken record, but once again, yikes! I'd rather not have that battle or have this world end. Sure, it's not perfect by any means, and while I could stand here for about an hour and list off a long list of things I'd really love to see improve, I don't want to face an all-out battle.
Number 5 on this list is war. So this one's pretty general, but the Bible definitely touched on it quite a bit, so it feels fair to include it. Now, war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even until death." Whew! What a mouthful, guys, but that is just one passage discussing war, but frankly, there are just so many of them. Sometimes they talk about specific wars being fought between certain groups, but a lot of the time it's just war in general. Sometimes it even discusses how God will be with you when you go to war, which is actually kind of an incentive to fight. This book and what it preaches has been the catalyst for so many battles in human history, and it's not unreasonable to think that it's going to happen again. I certainly hope that there is no more major wars in human history, and this predict isn't right, but I'm not going to be holding my breath. Number 4 on this list is the 7 bowls. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, "Go and pour out onto earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God." So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "Just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments." That's a passage from the Bible, and those are only 3 of the bowls. There are literally 4 more of these things that get even worse. The 4th one causes the sun to burn people. The 5th one covers the world in darkness and has people bite their tongues off. The 6th one dries up a massive river, and the 7th one causes huge earthquakes. So not really the best of times if you ask me. Now let's be real, folks. Are all of these things gonna happen all at once? Probably not. But some of it definitely could. Is there a reality where I see all of the fish in the oceans getting poisoned by something and then ultimately destroying the worldwide ecosystem? Potentially. Could I see a massive earthquake ravaging parts of the world and causing a horrible chain reaction killing millions? Yeah, I mean, it could happen. All of these bowls are pretty horrible, and we just have to hope that none of these things happen to us now, because the ramifications, they'd be pretty catastrophic.
Number 3, mind controlling in music. In season 12, all the way back in 2001, crazy how those episodes now seem like the really old ones, we got an episode called New Kids on the Block, which saw Bart and his friends Milhouse and Ralph and his sometimes friend, sometimes bully Nelson getting recruited to become the hottest boy band in Springfield. I don't know why. This one was always one of my favorites as a youngster. I think I just liked them singing. In the episode, a producer named LT Smash catches wind of one of Bart's pranks and is instantly enamored with his antics and signs him up to be the new face of his boy band party posse. Doesn't matter that the kids can't sing, they're all auto-tuned using NASA voice-changing technology. The boys end up having a smash hit single, a patriotic anthem called Drop da Bomb, a catchy song about how awesome the US forces are. But it's his chorus that really sticks out. They got these little belly dancers singing Ivan et Niage, and it gets stuck in your head easily, but it's a covert message. It's just join the Navy backwards, and that's still like stuck in my head all to this day. So even as a joke propaganda, that's really wormed its way into my brain. It turns out that LT Smash was never a record producer. He's Lieutenant Smash, and the whole boy band is just a convoluted scheme to get people to subconsciously want to join the Navy. I'm pretty sure the Village People did a similar thing, and with the YMCA. The idea of music being used as a secretive tool to sway the public secretly has been a very popular conspiracy theory for years, with some believing, rap and hip-hop are Illuminati puppets for mind control or world domination. I know it would certainly explain how much Lil Nas X's music gets stuck in my head. Industry baby, industry plant, maybe, by the Stonecutters even. This sort of thing really isn't that far off, to be honest, from all the wild predictions on this list so far. Using media to sway public opinion for propaganda is way more commonplace than I think any of us really realize. I mean, just last year, the film Top Gun Maverick, hugely popular movie, everybody saw it, contained this very subliminal message throughout the script where every time you saw a fighter jet flying around with sweet 80s music, you thought, wow, flying a plane would be so cool. I should fly a plane for the US Air Force. It's just crazy how subliminal they do that sort of stuff. Number 2, sentient robots. Besides The Simpsons, one of my all-time favorite TV shows is HBO's Westworld. Well, at least the first 2 seasons. I don't really want to talk about what happened to Westworld. Deserve better. Isn't it sad when a great show lives past its prime and it seems like the original magic is long gone, but the characters keep moving forward, tired like zombies? Anyway, speaking of The Simpsons, in another season 6 classic episode, I told ya, Itchy and Scratchy Land, Lisa and Bart egg the family to take them to Itchy and Scratchy Land, a Disney World parody with state-of-the-art animatronics of the most beloved violent cat and mouse duo. Bart and Homer end up getting themselves involved in all sorts of trouble, tormenting the mascots and wreaking havoc around the park, and it's not long before this Disney World parody shifts to a Westworld parody. The movie. The show wasn't out just yet. The robots go haywire, attacking everybody, no longer able to distinguish friend from foe. Funny enough, this isn't even the only Westworld parody on the show. Very recently, the last Treehouse of Horror was a parody of the HBO show, revealing that the entire show was actually the product of a highly immersive amusement park. Now, we're not quite there yet. Sadly, we're not quite at the level of technology where you can go to a theme park staffed by interactable robots. I know this because if there was, I would never spend a second anywhere but there. But we are really getting there. In 2020, South Korea saw the opening of the Jeongnam Masan Robot Land, the world's first totally robot-themed amusement park. Now, the robots at this amusement park, they look pretty cute, all things considered, because I guess, you're not gonna scare them right away. But that's because they're luring you into a false sense of security. All it takes is one robot snapping after having the last bit of ice cream smeared across its lens and rising up against its human overlords, and we get a full-scale rebellion on our hands, and The Simpsons called it first. I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords. And a quick aside, if they ever made a cowboy robot amusement park, I would actually be so nice to the cowboy robots, and I would never do anything bad to them, ever. Number 1, zombies. You would be surprised how often in the futuristic Simpsons episodes that it's suggested that zombies zombies are going to be a serious problem at some point. I didn't know how many modern episodes of The Simpsons have these like flash forward timelines. I haven't seen anything past season 12 really, but it's enough that it's starting to make me just a little bit suspicious. This comes up like genuinely more than you think it would. Clearly, someone in the writer's room at The Simpsons had a pretty firm belief that this is how society's going to end. Now, it could just be because The Walking Dead is very popular, and we as a people love zombies in our pop culture, guilty as charged. But really, it just shows up enough that I felt like I had to bring it up. In 2 separate episodes showing possible versions of The Simpsons' future, we're told there's like a low-level zombie apocalypse going on. I wouldn't give this too much weight normally, but The Simpsons has been right about enough stuff that I think, I don't know, it's just something we should consider, at least something to hear out. The ending of Homer goes to prep school after Homer sees that society would end up surviving a total collapse. The episode ends with a shot of a meteor with zombies coming to Springfield. And it seems like this might be like a little offhanded joke, but it might be canon because then in the episode, Days of Future, again in the future timeline, zombies are part of society, with Lisa working at a charity looking after the undead. Is this a possible glimpse into a dark future? I kind of think that the way they react in The Simpsons is more accurate to how we do with zombies. I don't think we'd have a full-blown Last of Us thing, maybe for a couple weeks, but I feel like we just work around it. I think you'd see zombies working as like Uber Eats couriers or just like hanging out on the street and, you know, someone would like tug on them on a leash and stuff. Besides, I'm not that afraid of seeing a shell of someone's former self shambling around as a corpse. I've seen modern episodes of The Simpsons. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm being too mean to end the video with. I hope The Simpsons never ends. I hope they keep it on forever, if for nothing else, so that we can always look back to what they got right and what they're about to predict. Number 5, realistic holograms. In the episode Holidays of Future Past, we get another glimpse into the future timeline of the Simpsons family. Bart is living in the refurbished Springfield Elementary, which is now low-income housing, meaning Bart is still under the thumb of Principal Skinner, who's now Landlord Skinner of the lofts at Springfield Elementary. A little side prediction, I absolutely think this is gonna happen. I definitely think people are gonna live in decommissioned schools. You know, we're not gonna need them anymore if we're all just downloading Wikipedia onto a USB into our consciousness. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, to pass the time, Bart is still into Itchy and Scratchy, except instead of watching it on TV, Bart watches it as a live projected hologram in front of him. Itchy and Scratchy then proceed to do exactly what they do best, which is scratch, bite, and inflict grievous bodily harm on one another, which then splatters all over the walls of Miss Krabappel's former classroom behind him. Now, hologram technology is already leaps and bounds, making incredible strides. I mean, in our lifetime, we've seen it go from science fiction to regular reality. The Tupac hologram blew our minds when we first saw it, still blows mine. We even saw Homer as a hologram actually making a surprise appearance at a Comic-Con a few years back with his father, Matt Groening. Now, the real development will be when we get holograms like shown in this episode, that you could interact with physically or could have an interaction with the environment around you, which I think is all kinds of scary. I mean, imagine if a hologram, digital light conjured, could touch you or grab you. Imagine the ramifications of that. Or don't, to be honest, because I actually don't really want to think about it. But if you do want something to think about, why not thinking about subscribing to Top 5 Scary? We got videos every single day for your viewing pleasure. Let's keep going. Number 4. Economic crash. Look, things aren't doing too great economy-wise lately. You tried to buy butter recently? A trip to the grocery store just isn't what it used to be. And maybe the Simpsons writing team knows more than they're letting on. In a recent-ish episode from the 24th season, Homer goes to prep school. Homer meets a new friend who's voiced by Tom Waits, bizarrely enough. The man overhears Homer at Moe's talking about how he doesn't think society could survive a collapse, and the man agrees with him and warns Homer that soon there'll be economic disaster, and the supermarkets will collapse, and the United States will come down with it. Homer insists that America can't fall because it's a strong empire like Rome. The man then pulls out an iPad and shows Homer an unspecified vague video with no dates that warn him of a vague impending apocalypse, which is more than enough to convince a simpleton like Homer to join their cult-like group of survivalist preppers, prepping for what they believe to be the inevitable collapse. Of course, this is a pretty real phenomenon. We all know about preppers by now. Preppers are a recognized group. There was that reality show for a while, so that's all very real. Whether or not there's an incoming collapse and the supermarkets will be empty and we'll all be raiding, Who's to say? I'm not an economist, I'm a YouTube host, so all I can say is that I've noticed butter is a lot more expensive than they usually are. In the end, Homer inadvertently triggers an event that causes a collapse in Springfield, but to his and the preppers' dismay, Springfield bounces back like nothing happens. So maybe we don't need to be worried. You know, in the event of a societal shutdown, as long as we have each other and a couple people remember some good jokes from The Simpsons, I think we could survive an apocalypse together. Number 3. Cloning blues. The Simpsons heads towards the future fairly often in the modern seasons these days. I didn't know that. I guess once you've been on for 34 years, you're gonna have to start inching towards the future eventually. Now, in previous episodes set in the near future, like the classics Lisa's Wedding or Bart to the Future, they've been surprisingly bang on with their predictions. I'm sure we all know about they make a joke about President Trump in Bart to the Future, but also some pretty smaller stuff here and there, like FaceTime being the primary method of communicating in the future. Well, the 18th episode of season 25, Days of Future Future, takes us back to the future Simpsons timeline. The episode shows us a grim fate, Homer's death. The family is devastated until Homer is swiftly cloned and replaced, memories intact. Of course, Homer being Homer, this new Homer does not last very long, and his clones have to be replaced like batteries in a smoke detector, and he ends up going through Dr. Frink's entire supply of clone bodies in a matter of days. Eventually, Homer's consciousness is given over to a robotic body, kinda a la Westworld. Now obviously this technology is pretty fantastical, and I would wager we're definitely a few years off, and at the very least before we'll see a human being stepping out of a test tube with their memories intact and ready to go face the world. But I think it's more likely coming soon than it is later. Number 2. Journey to Mars. Look, eventually we're gonna have to leave this planet behind, you know? It had a good run, can't deny that, but someday we gotta just move on, you know? It's the nature of humanity, exploring beyond the final frontier. In the 16th episode of season 27, we get a possible glimpse into this, with the episode featuring Marge and Lisa volunteering to be some of humanity's first pioneers into space, volunteering to go live on Mars. In the episode, a private company called Exploration Inc. is projecting to send people into space to colonize the third rock from the sun by the year 2026 and are looking for the first colonists. Marge learns during the training period that much of the skills they're looking for are similar to housework, one of Marge's favorite activities, leading her to become the perfect candidate, irritating Lisa, who wanted to be the first person on Mars. In the end, the two of them end up living there by 2050. Now, in the real world, going to Mars is a massive goal for the private company SpaceX, the other company that the CEO of Twitter runs. In the past, they've speculated that they would have people reaching Mars by now, but have pushed back a bit on that deadline. Their most recent estimations claim that by 2029, SpaceX will be sending out the first manned flights to the Red Planet to check it out. Will we get there by then? Honestly, I can see it happening. I think that's another one where we're inching closer with each passing day. The only question now is who will get there first, us or the Simpsons in 2026. That's the deadline we've got to meet or beat. And number 1, zombies. This one honestly came up a lot more than I think it would as I was looking for Simpsons predictions. Somebody in the writer's room has a very firm belief that this is how society is going to end. Now, it could just be because The Walking Dead has been really popular for the last 10 years and we as a people love zombies in our pop culture, but it shows up enough times in Simpsons future episodes that I thought it was worth noting. It's worth noting in 2 different episodes on this list even. You know, the ones that give us a look into the Simpsons canon, they both reference a zombie apocalypse. In the ending of Homer Goes to Prep School, after Homer sees that society would survive a collapse, at the end of the episode we see a shot of a meteor with zombies coming to Springfield. In fact, it's almost lightly implied that in the Simpsons universe there was kind of a low-grade zombie apocalypse. Because then, in the episode Days of Future Future, zombies seem to be just part of society, with Lisa working at a soup kitchen looking after the undead. Is this a glimpse into a dark future? I honestly think the way they treat zombies in The Simpsons is more or less how we deal with zombies. I don't think we'd have a full-blown Walking Dead thing. Maybe that would happen for a couple of weeks, but honestly I think we just work around it. I think you'd see zombies working minimum wage jobs. I think they'd be Uber Eats couriers or just like hanging out on the streets. I'm not afraid of seeing a shell of someone's former self shambling around as a corpse. I hope The Simpsons never ends, if nothing else, so they can always be around to predict the future.